Hey everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the UFC on ESPN Plus One. Henry, oh my God, this is a mouthful, right? Cejudo versus Dillashaw. That's what's going down this weekend on ESPN Plus. It's you got to pay $5 a month to get it. Well worth it. This is a great fucking fight. One of the greatest matchups, honestly, of all time. I mean, I know that phrase gets tossed around a lot, but it really is. This is a great fight. In terms of news and fight announcements and stuff, Darren Till is going to be fighting Jorge Masvidal on March 16th at UFC London. I think that's UFC on ESPN Plus 5. It's either 5 or 6, but I want to say it's 5. That's a great fight. Those are two guys who are, they're going to stand and they're going to stand and throw their hands around. Darren Till is a high level striker. I mean, he just got into a stand-up. I mean, a fight that took place completely on the feet with Wonder Boy and outpointed him to a decision, right? A lot of controversy about that. A lot of people think Wonder Boy won, but felt like Till did the only significant thing in the fight in knocking Wonder Boy down. Which, I mean, I talk about this all the time. I feel like fights should be judged. They should be judged more like a scale. Like the scores should be reflective of a scale. Like right when it comes out and the bell rings, they start right here. And when one fighter does more, he adds more weight to his end of the scale. And if this fighter does something significant, he adds more weight to his, and this goes up a little bit. And the score needs to reflect that differential. And I think the way you do that is by you have like 10 or 20 points available for the entire round. And then if, let's use 10 points as an example. If you win the round very dominantly, you might get like a 7-3. And I don't think a lot of people like that, but think about what the judging system does right now. It forces us to look at fights that you could clearly win a round if you were a fighter, and we have to pretend like it's close and give you a 10-9. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think there should be a larger differential and a larger consequence for losing a round. And then if it's razor thin, give him a 5-5. Who fucking cares? Or if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty and you have to trust in your judges before you do this, give him like a 5.5 to a 4.5. You know what I mean? I don't think there's anything wrong with throwing 0.5 on there. I don't know. I just feel like the way that we do it right now, where if you have to win so dominantly to even earn a 10-8, it seems so bizarre. It doesn't seem fair. So like I can clearly win a round and it's a 10-9 and the guy might barely win the next round and he gets a 10-9 as well. How the fuck does that work? That doesn't make any fucking sense. Your punishment for losing a round should be greater, especially if it's won decisively. And I think the judging system that we use needs to reflect that. Anyway, Jose Aldo just announced that he's got plans to retire by the end of the year. I don't blame him. He's had a fucking storied career back to his WEC days and his reign at 145 pounds as the UFC champion. He's had a hell of a career. Just knocked out Jeremy Stevens. I don't know, man. It's sad to see him go because he's such a fucking legend, but at the same time, I understand it. You don't want to hang around this game forever, especially like after the losses that you took to Conor and Max twice. Those are brutal losses, man. I mean, those are hard knockouts, and you're getting older. He's 32, which is weird because Aldo's been fighting for so long that, he might have been an example of someone who might have benefited from starting just a little bit later. But that's hard to say because he was such a fucking killer in his WEC days and even early UFC days. Even into right before he lost to Conor, I mean, there was no doubt that Jose Aldo was one of the pound-for-pound greats. I mean, his body of work at 145 pounds in the featherweight division is so fucking impressive. So if he feels like it's time to go, I'll be glad to see. I'm glad he has a plan, and it's good to see him get out, relatively unscathed. He seems to have his wits about him and everything so far, so good to see. And another big fight, Edson Barboza and Justin Gaethje is on March 30th in Philadelphia. And that's a fight that deserves to happen in Philadelphia, right? Among all those crazy motherfuckers. This is going to be a war. Justin Gaethje brings it, and Edson Barboza is a high-level striker, and he's so fucking fast, and he's got some of the best kicks in the entire UFC, not just the lightweight division, but the whole UFC. Great fight there. Some other announcements. I'm going to have Scott Holtzman coming on in advance of his fight on ESPN on the prelims. He's fighting on the Ngannou versus Cain Velasquez card. I think it's on March No, it's in February sometime. I can't remember. I want to say like February 17th. I might have the date wrong, but he's coming on to talk to me on January 30th, so I'll probably have the video posted on the 31st. And then a week later on February 6th, I'm going to be talking to Jay Cuccinello, who was a tough contestant, fought Brad Katona in the featherweight finale, and lost a decision, but had an excellent win over Tyler Diamond in the Tough House. Big upset. Tyler Diamond was a lot of people's picks to win the entire show. So I'm excited to talk to both of them. And I think Jay either dabbled in or is completely diving in to bare knuckle boxing. So I'm really looking forward to getting his take on that as well. Big events that are coming up. Bellator 214, the heavyweight Grand Prix. The championship's going to happen between Ryan Bader and Fedor. UFC on ESPN Plus 2. Marlon Moraes versus Rafael Assunção 2. That's going to be a great fight. Those are two really high-level guys at 135. Probably a title eliminator. And you got Jose Aldo fighting Renato Moicano right underneath it. And that's a dangerous fight for Jose. Excuse me. Renato Moicano is a great striker. He's looked phenomenal. Especially if you go back and watch his striking on display against Brian Ortega. I mean, Ortega looked good as well, but, I mean, Renato Moicano is a dangerous motherfucker. I always say that Brian Ortega and Renato Moicano's positions very well could have been reversed had he won that fight. And I think he was going to win until he went to the ground. I'd like to see the scorecards for that. But anyway, after that, you got UFC 234, Whittaker versus Gastelum. And it's a great fight. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to do that hot on pay-per-views, which is a fucking shame because Robert Whittaker is one of the very best in the world, and he gets almost no recognition. He's the middleweight champion. I mean, he beat Yoel Romero twice. Whew. Robert Whittaker's a bad motherfucker. He's looked great since moving up, too. Also fighting on that card is Anderson Silva versus Israel Adesanya, right? So going to see if there's a little bit of passing of the torch there. A lot of stuff to look forward to, so stay tuned, guys. And I'm pretty confident in my picks this week. There are a couple that could go back and forth. But who fucking knows? I say I'm confident in these and get them wrong all the fucking time. But anyways, thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment. I'll get back to your comments if you leave comments down there. And yeah, enjoy the show. It's here, everybody. The UFC's debut on ESPN. ESPN Plus, right? Not the actual big network. Well, all right, so let me look at the times because I got them pulled up here. There's going to be a early prelim card on ESPN Plus. It doesn't fucking tell me what time it starts here. A prelim card on regular ESPN, which is going to be headlined by Donald Cerrone and Alexander Hernandez. And then the main card is obviously going to be headlined by TJ Dillashaw and Henry Cejudo on ESPN Plus. And ESPN Plus is like $5 a month, and in my opinion, it's completely worth it. I get online all the time, and I see all these people bitching about it. They're like, "Oh, the UFC is just stealing more money from me." Their pay-per-view prices are pretty fucking high. $65. I mean, they have what 12 pay-per-views a year, and it's $65 if you want to watch it in high def, and everybody wants to watch it in high def. That's a lot of fucking money for one fight. Not one fight card, right? Like you pay $65 for 5 fights. With this plan, you're going to be paying $60 for, an ungodly amount of fights. There are going to be a ton of fucking fights on this ESPN Plus card. And the headliner on your next one is Marlon Moraes versus Rafael Assunção, and right underneath him is Jose Aldo versus Renato Moicano. If you don't think that fight alone is worth $5, I don't know. I don't know what to fucking tell you. Just, in my opinion, the money's well worth. Just pay the money. $5 a month. It's not that big of a fucking deal. Drop Fight Pass. Right? I think ESPN Plus is going to be a little bit better for bigger fights this year. I don't even know if you guys know whether they're doing Fight Pass anymore. If they're doing any Fight Pass cards, let me know. I don't know if they are. If that's the case, I'd like to see the price on Fight Pass come down a little bit because it's like $10 a month right now, right? But if you're not getting any live events, it's basically just a big fight library. So, which is awesome, by the way. I have Fight Pass. I use it all the fucking time. And I love it, but I would like to see the price come down. If ESPN Plus is going to get all the cards that are going to be streamed, that makes sense to me. But I don't know if you guys know, leave something in the comments for sure what the situation with that is. But the first fight on this card is gonna be well, let's talk about first before we start breaking this down. Let's talk about how important this fight is, because there's a very good chance that the UFC flyweight division is on the line, and the way Dana White's talking about it and the way just that he's acting around Henry, it seems like this division is gonna die regardless. But if Henry could beat him and beat him like solidly, I think it would. There's a very good argument that the division needs to stick around. I think it does anyway, because if you want to see technique executed at the highest level and extremely quickly and with very little room for error, then you got to watch small people fight. They say to learn jiu-jitsu from a little guy, right? I mean, I don't understand how, if you're a fan of martial arts, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love to see knockouts. I love to see heavyweights throw their fucking hands around, like, but man, there's something about watching just the crispness and the speed and the endurance that the flyweights have that it doesn't exist anywhere else. Maybe 135 a little bit. They're pretty comparable, I feel like, which is probably what the UFC is thinking, to be honest, that we can just mesh these things together, right? Make the people who are fighting 125 just bump up 10 pounds. But when you're that little, you got to think, I mean, like 10 pounds. The difference in 10 pounds between someone who weighs 125 pounds and 135 pounds is more significant than the difference between 195 and 185 pounds, because they're smaller. Like, that gap is theoretically, or whatever the fucking word would be, it's larger. That gap is larger. And I don't know. I feel like it's a bad idea to take it away. And I feel like a lot of people, in my opinion, wrongly blame it on Demetrius for not bumping up and fighting, but he was just defending his belts. Do I think there was a point in time when he should have jumped up and fought TJ Dillashaw? 100%. Or the champion at 135? Yeah, 100%. Because, I mean, regardless of what he had done, it would have validated the division. And, you know, I feel like the division, so you've got a guy like Henry Cejudo, right, who has fought Demetrius Johnson twice now. He's lost to Joseph Benavidez, a win over Sergio Pettis, and Sergio Pettis has a win over Joseph Benavidez, right? And that division's extremely competitive within itself, and Demetrius just sat so high up on the heap for so long that I think people started to think that it wasn't that good. But I think that Henry Cejudo beating Demetrius Johnson says a lot about how good the rest of the division really is. And I also think that this fight this weekend, tomorrow, is massively important, because like I said, I mean, there's a good chance that it'll go away regardless, or if it's a close fight, I don't think it'll stick around. But if Cejudo can go out and impose his will on TJ, who's one of the best fighters on the planet, it's got a good chance to hang around. I really think that. So, I mean, Cejudo is fighting for a lot this weekend, and this is, I mean, there's a very good chance that when the octagon door shuts behind them, we might be watching the highest level of martial arts that's ever been expressed in a professional bout. I mean, these two are, I mean, Henry Cejudo is an Olympic gold medalist. And I always say about TJ Dillashaw, if you had to build a fighter from the bottom up, I mean, creativity, movement, endurance, ability to change levels, his striking is phenomenal. Everything that TJ does is very sound and very expertly executed. I mean, he's a killer. He's an animal. So, fuck, man. I mean, overall, I think most people wanted to see TJ versus Demetrius Johnson. I think that's a fight that people wanted to see. But, I mean, Cejudo just beat the best in the world, man, and he's an Olympic gold medalist. I mean, and his striking has come a long way, especially if you watch his Wilson Hayes fight. He outclassed him, completely outclassed him, and knocked him the fuck out. So, I mean, this is an interesting fight coming up this weekend, and I think it's going to be really close. I've been going back and forth on who I think is going to win, and I really don't know. Because Henry Cejudo is a little bit smaller than TJ in terms of height, but he's dense. He's a little bit thicker through his core, and I think he's going to be used to fighting at this weight class. I don't know what TJ is going to look like here. Taking 10 pounds off a guy who weighs 135 pounds, like we just talked about earlier, is a big fucking deal. So, we'll see how it plays out. But let's get into breaking this thing down. The first fight is going to be number 12 ranked Glover Teixeira versus Carl Roberson. And Carl Roberson's coming in as a late replacement here. Who was Teixeira originally supposed to fucking fight? Jan something, Jan Cutabella. But man, Carl Robertson's getting stuck in a fucking tough spot here. I mean, Glover Teixeira is, but here's the problem: when you get fighters like this and matchups, when you get the call from the UFC that you have to step in on late notice against a veteran, like Glover Teixeira is still very legit. And if you doubt that, go back and watch his fight against Misha Serkinov. Watch him knock him the fuck out, right? I mean, he got dotted up in the Alexander Gustafsson fight, but Gustafsson's like at the top of the fucking heap, right? And it's closer to his prime than Glover is. I mean, I don't know. And he got into a fight where it primarily stayed on the feet. They went to the ground some, but Glover just couldn't keep up with Gustafsson's boxing. I mean, Gustafsson, and I think that's another thing that, like, the light heavyweight division is ruled by Jon Jones, right? And if you look at why their fight was so close, I'm getting a little off track here, but if you look at why Jon Jones and Alexander Gustafsson's fight was so close the first time, it was because Jon was exchanging with him. And in this last fight, you saw him just kind of sliding out of the way of punches, frustrating him, took him down, finished the fight, right? I mean, I've talked about this before, but that's one of the things that make Jon the best ever. But most recently, Glover Teixeira did drop a unanimous decision loss to Corey Anderson. And that's because, I mean, Corey Anderson has a really fucking strong wrestling base, and he's got a great boxing coach in Mark Henry. His hands have come a long way. And I don't want to even call it a crutch, but when you can lean on wrestling and you can resort to it in moments where you get hurt, and we'll talk about this with Gregor Gillespie a little bit later, it's a big help. It can completely change the course of the fight. You can recover, you can land a takedown. So I think that helps open their striking up a lot. And in this case, I mean, Corey Anderson was able to just dot him up. I think he had him in some trouble. He almost got caught with a guillotine at the end of the first round. Glover almost locked it up on Anderson, but I mean, that fight to me, like, it was a good example of how, like, if you're a good wrestler, it can really open your striking up. And you saw it with Khabib and Conor when he landed that big overhand right. I don't think Khabib's a better striker than Conor. I think if they got in a kickboxing match, Conor would light him up. But when you've never really seen that before, and you got your hands low, because if you're Conor, you're probably thinking in that fight, okay, I've got a striking advantage here, so I can afford to drop my hands a little bit lower to prep for the takedown because I'm confident in my striking. And when Khabib came over top with that, he just fucking smashed him with it. And I think it caught him off guard. But that's another example of how when you have wrestling to lean on, it opens everything else up because the other person's always thinking about the threat of the takedown, you know? And with a guy like Khabib, I mean, all he has to do is just get a hold of you. He just has to grab your fucking foot and he latches onto it and he somehow just drags you to the fucking ground and dominates you. I mean, Jesus. We're way off fucking topic here. But Glover Teixeira versus Carl Robertson. I think this is a tough fight for Carl Robertson, but keep in mind that Carl Robertson has a high-level kickboxing background. He got called in on late notice against one of the legendary I don't really follow kickboxing, so I'm not going to pretend to know this guy, right? I only heard of him when I started like doing a little research on Robertson. But his name is Jerome DeBanner, I think it was. And he was like 82-22 in kickboxing or Muay Thai. And they had a K1 bout. And it was Carl Robertson's professional kickboxing debut. And he lost a controversial decision, but he knocked him down in the second round. He knocked him down twice, I guess. The first one they counted as a slip. But when he knocked him down in the second round, I mean, he was rocked. And the ref gave Jerome, like, maybe 30-plus seconds to recover. I mean, so Carl Robertson has a high-level striking pedigree. I mean, he's very good on the feet. So the problem is, though, is that Glover's competent on the feet. He's got some pretty good dirty boxing. And if he can get in close and get into the clinch, which I think will happen at some point, I think it's going to be hard for Robertson to stay away from Glover. But I think Glover's going to close the distance and land a takedown, which is going to be big because the only loss on Robertson's record is a submission loss to Cesar Ferreira in the first round. He got caught in an arm triangle. So I think that he's got some work to do on the ground, and I think Glover's really high level on the ground. I think him being a veteran is going to play. A lot of the times when these fights pop pop up. Like lately, I've been picking the new guy, right? Like coming in with they're all fucking full of piss and vinegar and ready to go, right? So I've been kind of leaning towards them. But in this fight, I really like Glover. I think he's going to go in. I think he's going to close off Space, get into some dirty boxing exchanges, because Space is going to be Carl Roberson's best friend in this fight. He has to maintain distance, stay away from him, stay away from, the grappling exchanges that could stem as a result of getting overly aggressive. So, I think I'm going with Glover, and I think it's going to be like a second-round submission. I think the first round will be a little bit of a feeling-out round for both guys. Glover's not going to want to rush into anything, and Roberson's going to be defensive because of what I just said. I think Teixeira's going to take the safe route and just try to get him out with a submission win, get him on the ground and pound, maintain top position. His jiu-jitsu's high level, so, don't sleep on Glover Teixeira. But there's a very good chance that if I think what Carl Roberson has to do if he wants to win this fight is like not only he has to aggressively maintain the distance. You got to keep Glover on the end of your punches, keep him at range, and you got to get in and get out, but you got to constantly keep the pressure on him because if you let him control the pace of the fight, he's eventually going to put you up against the cage, and that's where you're going to start getting into trouble. So, like I said, I think that's the game plan that Glover's going to be able to execute. So I'm taking him second-round submission, but I think if Roberson fights an aggressive, smart fight, he'll have a good chance to win. Next fight is going to be Paige Van Zant versus Rachel Ostovich, and there's obviously a lot of controversy flying around about this fight, right? Because Greg Hardy is the co-headliner he's the co-main event on this fucking card, and Rachel Ostovich is a victim of domestic abuse. So a lot of I don't want to get too far into that shit because what he did is obviously wrong, but I believe that, I don't know. It's such a fucking tough situation because how do you deny that he's good? He's 3-0. He's been knocking people dead. I don't think he's ever made it out of the first round. You can't deny that he's talented. And what talent will get you in MMA and skill, and it'll get you to the top quickly. And he's a pro athlete. He was a high-profile NFL athlete. He played football at the highest level. So I don't think this was the card to do it. I kind of agree with Ariel Helwani on this stance. I don't think, with her being on this and this being such a historic moment for the UFC to move to ESPN, I don't think Hardy's earned that. But what the fuck can you do? The UFC is just thinking money, and I think when people talk about things, it generates more revenue. Whether it's, any news is good news, right? Even the bad sometimes. Especially when you're like I said, the more people are just buzzing about it, the more it's going to get around and it'll reach more people and they'll end up buying it. So I think that's probably the UFC's thinking behind this is the money that they can make from people talking about it because they know people are going to talk about it. But fuck, what can you do? Anyway, the fight, though, is very interesting because Paige Van Zant has lost 2 in a row. But before that, she had a TKO or a fucking KO win over Beck Rawlings. I don't want to say she kicked her fucking head into the bleachers. And Rachel Ostovich has been alternating wins and losses. She most recently just lost to Montana De La Hosa in July of last year, obviously. And then Karine Gavorgian, she picked up a win over her in December of 2017. So she went through a little bit of she fights about every 6 months. I'd say that's a little less. It's not as active as I'd like to see her. But, she's only 4-4. And she's 28 or 29, so I think she's relatively new to all this, and she's only got 2 UFC fights under her belt, right? She had the tough finale, and then she fought another tough finale against Montana De La Hosa. I don't know. I think the way that Paige is going to have to win this fight because I think Paige is a little too small for 125. I really do. I think that she is better suited at the lower weight class. I think Rachel's going to have a little bit of a size advantage over her, and Rachel's jiu-jitsu is very good. She's a good grappler. But I expect Rachel to sit back and look to counter a lot, so Paige is going to have to be careful to stay away from the power of Ostovich, because she throws some fucking heat sometimes. When she's looking to counter, she's got a big overhand right, and, she's definitely powerful. But for Paige, I think the key is going to be everybody knows Paige has great endurance. So the key is going to be to land consistently and keep moving and tire her out and get in and get out of your exchanges. Stay away from any grappling exchanges, because if you look throughout Paige's career, Rose Namajunas kind of dominated her everywhere, kind of exemplified how many levels there are to the game. But she's really struggled on the ground. I mean, against Jessica Rose Clark, who was her most recent loss, struggled on the ground. I mean, granted, she broke her arm in the second and she was looking good on the feet, but once it got to the ground, she just couldn't really get up. She didn't really have anything to offer there. And same thing against Michelle Waterson. I mean, Michelle Waterson hit her with a beautiful toss, took her back, and ended up rear naked choking her. So her struggles have come on the ground, and Rachel Ostovich is pretty good on the ground, and she's a little bit bigger. So I think that's going to play a factor here. I like Rachel Ostovich in this fight. I think she's going to – it might be a unanimous decision on the ground. Look for her to shoot for some takedowns and kind of expose that now that that's kind of been, a hole in Paige's game. I'm sure they're working on cinching it up, but I'd be looking for Ostovich look for counters and takedowns, and if Paige gets overly aggressive, that's when she's going to go in and try to time a single or a double. I like her chances to win this fight, and Paige could win this fight as well. I mean, she's got more experience. She's got more fights than Ostovich, and like I said, her cardio could end up playing a big factor in this because she can just keep putting a pace on you. But she's got to, be careful not to get in too close and throw anything too aggressive and end up on her back. I'm taking Ostovich unanimous decision. I don't know if she'll be able to finish her, but I think she's going to I think the fight's going to end up going to the ground, and she'll be able to pick up a win. All right, next up, we've got Joseph Benavidez versus Dustin Ortiz. And, man, you want to talk about one of the highest-level fighters in the UFC. Joseph Benavidez is one of those guys. He's on a crazy win streak right now. Well, it got broken up by his loss to Sergio Pettis, which was controversial as well, right? But let me find how many fights he's won in a row. It's something crazy. It's like almost 10. Before that, no, it's not 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 in a row before he lost to Pettis. And then he most recently picked up a win over Alex Perez, who I think was short notice. But listen to the only guys that Benavidez has ever lost to in his career. Dominic Cruz, Demetrius Johnson, and then Sergio Pettis in a fight that was really close and I think could have gone either way. And I think that Pettis could have been a little bit more aggressive in that fight. I think he was a little bit too reserved and trying to be a little too calculated. I think when he hurt Benavidez, he should have really got after it a little bit more and put the gas on. And that's what I think. So you've seen Benavidez get hurt, and not his last fight, but the two before that against Cejudo and against Pettis. And both pretty early. Like, he gets tagged early on, he has in those two fights at least. So if I'm Dustin Ortiz, I'm looking to go in there and get aggressive because both of their styles are going to want to come forward. This is going to be an exciting and fun fight to watch. But if I'm Ortiz, I'm moving forward, and I'm trying to land something early. You know what I mean? Just to get, not only to get the momentum on my side, but to potentially hurt him. Because, and I think, like, Ortiz is one of those guys who, if he cracks you, he's gonna pursue the hunt viciously, which is, I think, what you have to do to get a guy like Benavidez out of there. I think when you start giving him space and you're not really attacking him and you're not making him think or worry too much and you're trying to be patient. It's good to be patient, but I think Sergio was too patient with his striking. And I think it cost him, where I think Ortiz will kind of swarm you if he hurts you. But that being said, Joseph Benavidez is one of the best in the world. His only losses have come against the elite of the elite, and I'm looking for him to pick up a unanimous decision win. I think he's going to dominate Ortiz. I think they have similar styles, and I think that Benavidez just executes things a little bit better and moves a little bit better. And, one thing that Benavidez will do is after combinations, he won't move. So he's got to be careful in situations like that against another aggressive guy who's going to be coming forward, because after a combo, he could get caught with a flurry. You know what I mean? But as long as he's moving, I think Benavidez is going to be able to execute and just perform at a level that Ortiz isn't quite at yet. I think Ortiz is very talented. Like I said, he's aggressive. He's riding a 3 or 4 fight win streak right now, maybe more than that. Knockout, unanimous decision knockout. So, I mean, 2 first-round knockouts in the 125-pound division isn't extremely common, right? So, I mean, he's on a little bit of a roll right now. It's an interesting fight, and I think that he could catch Benavidez. I think if he catches him, it'll likely be early. like first or second round. But I think if he doesn't catch him, Benavidez is going to kind of dictate the pace of the fight and just take over and implement his game plan. All right, the next fight is one that I'm really excited for. Gregor Gillespie versus Yancy Medeiros. And Yancy Medeiros has been in some fucking wars lately. I mean, he just got out of a knockout loss to Cowboy Cerrone. Before that, he picked up a third-round TKO over the other Cowboy, Alex Oliveira, which was one of the craziest fights. I mean, for 3 rounds straight, it was just a barn burner. And both guys were hurt at one point, and I think Oliveira almost had Medeiros out of there in the first round, and then they hurt each other again in the second, and then he was able to just, I mean, he's Hawaiian, right? So you know he's tough as fuck. Trains with Max Holloway. Bad motherfucker. And he thrives on that chaos a little bit, right? And he's fighting a guy in Gregor Gillespie who is a phenomenal wrestler. Went to Edinburgh University, which is about an hour north of Clarion, which is where I went, a little more than an hour probably, like an hour and a half, 2 hours. North of Clarion, where I went to college. It's actually a sister school of Edinburgh. It's where Frankie Edgar went to school. Kurt Angle also went to school at Clarion. It's really weird. It's like they're small schools, but like Josh Koscheck went to Edinburgh. You get some pretty famous wrestlers out of those 2 PA schools, and a couple other ones up there as well. But anyway, he holds like a whole bunch of records at Edinburgh, and he win? I think he won a national title. He won national title while he was wrestling for Edinburgh. So his wrestling is really fucking high level, and it's aggressive. And when he gets people down, it's not just that he gets them down. It's that he's constantly working to pass, and the pace that he's moving at is ferocious. I mean, he's not letting up at all. He never lets off the gas, and he never gets fucking tired. And he's strong, and you can just tell that when he locks people down, it's like you can tell that they don't like dealing with the pressure that he's putting on them. I think he gets a lot of passes, not only because his technique is fucking close to flawless, but also because he just puts so much pressure on people that I think it makes them make mistakes. It makes them want that pressure off, and they're willing to sacrifice position in order to let him advance. Like, that's how bad they want the pressure off of them. And he just swarms people. But this is one of those fights that I think could actually end up going a lot of directions, because obviously Gregor Gillespie's wrestling pedigree is going to be known. It's not going to be like unbeknownst to Yancy Medeiros. And Medeiros likes to throw his fucking hands, but people who come out and strike aggressively tend to get taken down because their weight will get thrown off, and they're trying to get in this like fucking firefight, and they end up giving up. They end up sacrificing something that gets them a little bit off base, and they get taken down, right? But if Yancy is reserved and brings Gregor to him, he might be able to dot him up on the feet. So, like I said, there are a lot of ways this can go, because if you look at Gregor Gillespie's fight against Jason Gonzalez, that's a perfect example that Gregor Gillespie he's a fighter, like at heart, because I think he was clearly the better wrestler. He's going to be the better wrestler in a lot of situations that pop up in this weight class, a lot of them. I mean, his wrestling, it's impressive. And watch how he works when he gets people down. If you've never watched him fight, go back and watch his fights. The way that he like slices through people's guards and just, it's nasty. But when he fought Jason Gonzalez, they would get into some fucking wars, and I thought that he'll take some risks on stuff like that. Like they had some heated exchanges on the feet. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I could see Yancy being very patient and making Gregor come to him and counter, which I think is how Yancy has to win. I think if Yancy's pushing forward and getting overly aggressive, unless he draws Gregor into the firefight that he got into with Jason Gonzalez, which I think Gregor's going to avoid if he can. I think he's going to try to take this fight to the ground and dominate him on the ground. I don't fucking know. This fight could go a lot of different ways, but I think the most likely scenario is that Yancy starts off reserved and patient, and it kind of allows Gregor to push him up against the fence. I think he's going to kind of charge in, get him there, and I think that Yancy is going to probably defend the takedowns at first, but as the course of the fight wears on, like the fighter in Yancy and the warrior in Yancy is going to come out, and he's going to want to start swinging, and that's where he's going to get actually taken down and put on his back. I think, I think the longer the fight goes, the more the odds swing into Gregor's favor because I think he's going to land a takedown at some point. And when he does, I think he's going to do work on Yancy. No offense to Yancy Medeiros. I mean, I love watching him fight, and he's very talented, and he has a great chance to win this fight. Make no mistake about it. He's a bad motherfucker. I mean, his only losses have come to like Donald Cerrone, Francisco Trinaldo, Dustin Poirier, and there's one more big name he lost to. Jim Miller. I mean, so he's lost to some high-level motherfuckers, you know? So he's seen some high-level shit in there too, and this is going to be Gregor Gillespie's biggest fight of his career. That's a big thing to keep in mind. So it's a lot of pressure on you. I don't know how he deals with that or how he feels it, but I like Gregor to get the win. I'm looking for like maybe a first or second round submission. I don't think it'll go all 3 rounds. I'll be surprised if it does. Yancy is a vet, so he might be able to defend, so he might get into like the second round, but I really think when Gregor gets him down, he's just going to swarm him. If he gets him down, right? You never fucking know. Like I said, I think Yancy has a good chance to win this fight. He's really good with his hands. But when you have wrestling, and like we talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, but when you have that wrestling to lean back on and fall back on, especially, I mean, there was that Jason Gonzalez fight. You'll see Gillespie get into exchanges and get hurt, shoots a single right away, and it can nullify things and let you recover. It's such an important tool to have in your toolbox, you know, to be able to pull that out not whenever you want, but gets you out of a lot of sticky situations. That's for fucking sure. All right, co-main event. We talked about it. Alan Crowder and Greg Hardy. I don't know how to get so too in depth about this. I mean, Greg Hardy's 3-0 professionally. 2 of his wins have come on the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. He hasn't seen anyone really high level yet. Alan Crowder has a loss to Justin Willis. But other than that, he was on like a win streak of like, I think like 8 wins maybe or something like that, or 7 or 6, something like that. I don't know a whole lot about the guy. I've only ever seen him fight twice. But I will say this. He has a tendency after he throws punches to leave his chin hanging in the air and not move his head. And when you're fighting a guy like Greg Hardy who has serious knockout power, that's a problem. Got to get that head movement. But if this is tough because I do think Hardy, they get into this is what Crowder should do, because if you watch his fight on the Contender Series, he reads things coming at him very well. Like, he moves his head and he gets out of the way of shots and he counters really well, right? And he'll come back with things, and he's constantly like reading, and he's able to gauge distance well, just slipping out of the way of punches and coming back and, you know, throwing something else back at him. But he has to fight that fight for, in my opinion, 3 rounds. You got to drag Hardy into deep water and get him tired and let him try, because he's aggressive. He's going to be looking for the knockout, I'm sure. So try to lure him into some traps, like counter him. Don't put yourself in extreme danger. Get in and out quickly. I say that about a lot of fights, right? Like, get in and out, but it's important. A lot of guys, they get in and they throw their exchanges, and our instructor talks about this all the time at kickboxing. They sit there and admire their work, and that's a problem, because when you do that, that's when your opponent is going to be firing things back at you. Like, you have to move your head afterwards. You can't sit there and see what damage you were doing. So if Crowder can move I don't like him getting into exchanges with, you know what I mean? I think the way that he wins this fight is by tiring Hardy out. But I think at some point there's going to be an exchange that's probably thrown, and it's going to leave Crowder open. I think that Hardy will have more significant knockout power, and I think he's going to land at some point. But that's how I see the fight playing out. I think Hardy's probably going to win via KO or TKO, and if I'm Crowder, though, I'm kind of doing a little bit of like what John did to Gustafsson for the first 2 rounds. I'm okay with moving backwards. I'll let him come to me. I'm reading what he's doing. I'm getting a feel for, you know, and there's a good possibility that with Greg Hardy being new, the more that you frustrate him, the more mistakes that he'll start to make, because he'll make mistakes out of frustration. So if you can dodge his punches, he'll start doing fundamental things wrong, and that's when you can start picking him apart, because you got more fights than him. You got more fight experience. You know, that matters. You got to use that. You can't get into a firefight with a guy like this. He hits too fucking hard. All right, we're finally at the headliner. Henry Cejudo versus TJ Dillashaw for the flyweight championship. And this is a fucking great fight. I was calling for Demetrius Johnson to fight TJ for a long time. And this is probably, I mean, it would have been a bigger fight, I think, because of the run that Demetrius Johnson was on had he been able to beat Cejudo. But this is a great fight nonetheless. I mean, Henry Cejudo, youngest Olympic gold medalist in U.S. history, just upset who is widely considered the greatest of all time in Demetrius Johnson in a war. I mean, in a great fight. It was, he came out in the first round, rolled his ankle, had to switch to southpaw for, I mean, almost the entire round. You could see he was starting to get it back a little bit at the end of the first, moving around on it a little better. But majority of that first round was spent fighting out of a stance that he doesn't fight out of very often. And, I mean, Demetrius, you know, he didn't get as aggressive as I thought he would when that happened. I thought it was, when that happened, I'm not kidding, I was sitting there watching, I was like, oh, fucking fight's over. There's no way that Cejudo's going to be able to keep up with Demetrius if he's compromised. But I don't know. I don't know what it was that made Demetrius not. I mean, he was pushing him forward and stuff, but I just didn't think he was aggressive. I think he should have attacked more. I think he should have been mixing things up and getting after it, because I think Cejudo was compromised. I mean, he couldn't put weight on that foot. And, you know, they go back and forth, winning a couple rounds. Like, Cejudo would win the second, and then I think Demetrius won the third, and then Cejudo won the fourth, and the fifth was fucking close. I thought Demetrius outstruck him for the first. I thought Demetrius over the course of the fight outstruck Henry most of the time, but I think the difference is there were never any moments where Demetrius controlled Cejudo, because Cejudo was landing in some of those exchanges too, like some nice right hands and some kicks sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, he was getting off in those, but just not as often as Demetrius. But there were moments in the fight where Cejudo would control Demetrius, no matter how long it was, whether it was for 5 seconds, he would, you know what I mean? He would land something and do something to control him and manipulate him. And I think that was the difference in the fight. I thought he deserved to win the fight. I thought it was razor fucking thin. I thought it was a great fight, but I thought Cejudo did just edge it out. Thought he deserved the win. And he's a testament to, I mean, what someone who could apply everything that it takes to win an Olympic gold medal, he applies it to martial arts, right? I mean, look how far his striking has come. And, you know, he can stand in that wide stance because he has such a strong wrestling base. And I think that wrestling base is going to be important when he fights TJ Dillashaw, because if you look throughout TJ's, I mean, granted, he knocked Cody out, who's a phenomenal boxer. But I feel like, especially in the second one, Cody wanted that knockout back so fucking bad. I thought he could have fought a more patient fight and countered TJ a little bit, because TJ's an aggressive motherfucker. And if you look at what Garbrandt did to Cruz, I mean, he just, the reason that the Cruz and TJ Dillashaw matchup is so interesting, but also why their fight was so close, is because Dominic Cruz is constantly dancing around and moving away and, you know, ducking his head this way and going that way and doing all these different funky ass movements. He's got amazing footwork and he's very hard to hit. And TJ's aggressive. And when he's marching forward like that, he's missing with a lot of shots and he's got to keep pushing the pace and he's whiffing and, you know. But with Cody just stood in the fucking pocket and let Dom dance around and forced him to come in. And when he did, he just countered. And his hands are lightning fucking fast. You know, this is a tough fucking fight to pick. I think TJ overall has more tools and uses them better. I think he's got great kicks. He's got great movement. He's got great endurance. One of the things that's going to be important in this fight, though, and maybe I'm like nitpicking, maybe this isn't as big a deal as I'm going to make it out to be, but one of the most important parts of TJ Dillashaw's game plan is changing levels. He'll hit you up top with stuff. He'll go to the body. He'll shoot a takedown. And I think that Cejudo is a little bit smaller than him, and he's denser, and his center of gravity is going to be a little bit lower. Oh, and yeah, he's a fucking gold medalist in Olympic freestyle wrestling. I think taking that away from TJ, and it's not that TJ doesn't have great Muay Thai, don't get me wrong, but I think that taking that aspect of the game away from TJ makes this fight extremely interesting, because I think Cejudo's takedown defense is going to be on point. And if you look at like TJ when he fought guys like John Lineker, granted John Lineker is very heavy-handed. TJ's always fights brilliantly, right? But he relies on taking down. I mean, he's got great timing on his takedowns. He sets them up very well. They're not telegraphed. Nothing that TJ does is telegraphed. But the question is, can he do it against an Olympic caliber wrestler like Cejudo? And I think Cejudo's defense is going to hold up, and it's going to force them into some striking exchanges. And I think that it might allow Cejudo to start implementing some of his takedowns. And when he does that, that's when he can take the fight over. The problem, though, is that TJ is aggressive and he's extremely talented on the feet. Like, what I just laid out is probably Cejudo's path to victory, right? Like, he's got to hope that his wrestling holds up. TJ can't change levels on him, and he's got to push forward and land his own takedowns. I don't like TJ I don't like Henry Cejudo in a stand-up war in this fight. I think TJ's too fucking aggressive and he's too good and his movement's too fluid. I'm taking TJ Dillashaw to win this fight. I think he's going to knock him out in like the third. And, I could see Cejudo winning the fight. It's not like this is like, to me, this, I say this about a lot of fights, but this is a close-ass fight. I mean, this is a coin flip fight. But I feel like at some point, TJ is going to expose something in his striking because he's going to be, Henry Cejudo is a big 125er, but TJ I think is going to be a little bit bigger. And I think his aggressiveness is going to, it's going to open some things up, and it's going to be a lot for Henry to deal with on the feet. I don't think he's ever seen a style like TJ's. And, I think, like I said, it's tough. I could see Henry winning this fight for sure, but I just feel like TJ's aggressiveness more than anything is going to win him this one. Close fucking fight. I'm not betting on any of the fucking fight. I feel like there's a lot of really good matchups that could end up going either way. I'm pretty confident in how I picked this week, but you never fucking know with fighting. But all right, guys, I think that wraps things up. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the podcast. And be sure to leave your thoughts on my picks, whether I'm right, whether I'm wrong, what you think's going to happen. Leave them in the comments. Drop a like, subscribe, or don't. I say this all the time. You guys are fucking adults. You can do whatever you want. What do we got? Oh, yeah, like I said, don't forget, January 30th, Scott Hot Sauce Holtzman's coming on to talk to me. I'll have that posted probably on the 31st. And then Jay Cuccinella's coming on February 6th as well. And we're going to talk about his transition into bare-knuckle boxing and what's next for him. So stay tuned, and thanks again for listening, guys. Have a good one. Bye.